SYS presents Adventures in Online Education.
Hello, friends. You're listening to SYS Presents Adventures in Online Education. I'm your host, Natalie Conway. Thanks for being here. If you're new to the podcast, first off, welcome. I am so glad that you're here. You're going to want to head over to aoepodcast.org and enter your info at the bottom of the page to start receiving the AOE newsletter. It's a little piece of positivity for your inbox. Returning listeners, I appreciate you so much. Thanks for being here. If you like AOE, you're going to love our new daily podcast, This Day in Education. You'll learn about important people, events, and inventions that have shaped education in the U.S. and beyond. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or at thisdayined.org. All right, today is a super cool episode. I get the pleasure of speaking with Nefertiti Dukes. She leads the professional development team at Screencastify, where they focus on what video makes possible for classroom educators, not just what Screencastify makes possible. Before joining the Screencastify squad, Nef taught middle school and high school humanities, and she has worked with learners of all ages on speech and debate. Today, we talk about how video can democratize education and much more. So, you ready? Let's learn something new. Welcome to the podcast, Nef. I am so excited to talk to you today. Really appreciative of your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Before we dive in, so many of my guests have worked as educators and then changed course to education adjacent, I'll call it, careers, either in leadership or writing or technology development. What caused you to make the move from the classroom to Screencastify?
I will say that it was not a super intentional move, and I wish I could say that I was a huge mastermind and I said, I'm going to leave the classroom and do something really awesome. I think what led me to leave the classroom was wanting to have a bigger impact on education. When I was in the classroom, I loved to talk with colleagues about what education could look like, how we could innovate, how we could think bigger. And when I joined Screencastify, it was this opportunity to be behind the scenes, talk to lots and lots of teachers, and engage in those conversations. I didn't necessarily know how long I would be there, when I would get back to the classroom, and I would love to say that I have those questions answered, but I still don't. And here we are 3 years later, getting to talk to more and more teachers and have more conversations about education. So I suppose I got to do what I wanted to.
That is awesome. And I love that. I think that's the hallmark of any educator, really, is that they just want to increase their impact. They want to just help not only the 20 or 30 kids in front of them, but so many more. And it's really cool that you get to do that now through your work at Screencastify. So for those in the audience who might not know, what is Screencastify and why is it a tool that online educators should be using?
Yeah, absolutely. So Screencastify is a full suite of video creation tools. So we've got a tool to help educators record themselves. We've got a tool to edit videos. And we also have a tool that allows educators to be able to request videos from anyone. Most frequently, that is requesting videos from students, but it might be requesting a video from a parent or a colleague or all types of things. So the reason that we are so excited about what Screencastify does is it really democratizes and allows for more individualized education. Sort of tongue-in-cheek, since I started, we've been talking about this idea of teachers being able to clone themselves and what that makes possible in classrooms. I think about my time as a 8th grade language arts teacher where my administration was asking me, please, please engage in more small group instruction, engage in more differentiated instruction. And the biggest challenge there was that there was only one of me, and my students had such varied needs. And what video allows educators to do is to be able to create different videos to fit the myriad things that students might need. And that's in both in-person education, but also in online education. And I think the real cool thing about online education is that it allows learners to take control of their own learning often, and video is a better way to be able to do that. I do a little bit of training as part of my role here at Screencastify, and I like to sometimes start trainings with a question. What would it look like if our classrooms were a little bit like Netflix or a little bit like YouTube, where right when you want to learn something, you have access to that information? And I think that's what video allows. Right when you're needing something, it's there and you get to engage with it.
That is such a cool idea. I love that question. It gets me really excited for what an online classroom could look like, honestly, that you would have that menu of choices and be able to differentiate so specifically for unique needs and unique levels of skill or mastery and have that available. I feel like online educators lean a lot on content created by other teachers or other
Mm-hmm.
programs sometimes, and it's really great that Screencastify and other screen recorders allow us to be personal with it, because I think when a child sees their own teacher, the one who they interact with in Zoom or Google Classroom or wherever it might be,
Mm-hmm.
them providing that instruction to, I think that's really meaningful. Nothing against Khan Academy or any of those other kinds of things, because they have their place and they're really valuable and helpful as well. But to be able to do that personally as the teacher and really make the video streamlined to what you're doing specifically in your class, or speak directly to a child or a group of kids by name, that's really powerful too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that is something that we care deeply about at Screencastify. But we also recognize that online educators and educators more broadly are saying that we have a whole heap of a lot to do. And the reason that we are turning to things like Khan Academy, YouTube, you name it, is because we don't have the opportunity to be able to create things that are perfectly curated. And often what we say to those folks is that there is a middle ground. One of the cool features about Screencastify is that it allows teachers to record the audio that comes from their computer. So when folks come to me and they say, I love Khan Academy, I say, me too, and I've used it in the classroom. But how might we be able to marry Screencastify with the Khan Academy, where a teacher might come on and provide a 15-second intro to a Khan Academy video, record over that, and then maybe interject to provide some more context or to talk specifically to particular students, and then continue on with the Khan Academy video. So I think in an ideal world, teachers have the time to be able to record videos that are wholly them and allow them to play into the relationships that they've created with their students. But if that's not possible, how can we think about appending what already exists to make it more personalized and more differentiated?
So smart. I have never thought of that, interjecting in the middle of a video or something. That's so brilliant. Yes, because why not? There's my daughter is in online kindergarten at the moment, and her teacher will create the intro to a video, which I thought was
Mm,
really neat. She would say, "Okay, this is what we talked about Monday, and now you're going to watch this video." And she'll lay the groundwork for what it is, giving kids a little bit of background knowledge, accessing what they did the day before, and then bam, there's the video. So wise. I think you're right, because there is that middle ground. Like you said, you don't have to be all in. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And do what you have the time and energy and creative desire to do, and that you can execute well for kids. I really also liked what you said about democratizing education. A lot of educators are focusing now on adjusting the curriculum and their teaching methods to be more accessible, to be more equitable, and especially in the online setting, we have just so many options in order to do that. We've talked a couple of times on the podcast about Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, and how that framework allows educators to engage all students more readily in the learning. In what ways can an online educator make their teaching more inclusive, more accessible, specifically through the use of a screen recorder? How does video help teachers adapt and adjust their teaching practices? Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I think that there are lots of things that they could do. And I suppose to make sure that this is not a 3-hour podcast, I will go a little bit down in terms of how I respond to that. But I think one of the things that I get really excited about is the opportunity to be able to present information in multiple modalities. So by design, a screen recorded video or a webcam video likely includes audio. And that's one way that we might be able to engage with learners. But we also have a text editor in our editor that allows folks to be able to add text. So imagine you might be sharing a step-by-step process, and you've got the opportunity for some learners to be able to hear those steps and internalize it. Other learners might be looking at the words on the video and using that to internalize what they ought to do next. And then beyond that, we've also added these visual elements to Screencastify. So things that are like using a pen tool to be able to draw arrows to things, or being able to say, this is step 1 or this is step 2. We've added emojis and rectangles and all sorts of things that really are meant for educators to pick what is going to make the most sense for them and their students in order to provide that information. I think the other thing that we think about in terms of universal design for learning is also in terms of access. And I think that's where video and Screencastify is a really, really big part of the conversation. And we like to think of our video as being on demand, which I've kind of alluded to. It also is replayable. So one thing that might allow for deeper learning is that a student needs to hear things 15 different times, while another student might need to hear things 7 times. And in a traditional classroom, it's really, really hard to make that happen. And students might feel hampered to be able to raise their hand, whether that's in person or virtually, to say, hey, Miss Conway, I want to hear that again. And that stigma doesn't exist where you can literally say rewind and play. And beyond that, we also like to think about our videos as being pausable in terms of allowing students to think about how they best learn. I recently needed to put on a car dolly behind a U-Haul, and it's this really complex process that requires you to do it right, or else your car is going to be messed up, right? And you're going to owe U-Haul thousands and thousands of dollars. And it was such an enlightening experience because the way in which they taught customers how to do this was through this video from a U-Haul executive. And what I did was I said, okay, here's step number 1. I paused that video and then attempted to actually do step 1 and then came back to the video. And as I was going through, obviously I'm not thinking about work, but it was hard not to, because I'm like, this is the way that I'm learning this process. And it would have been impossible for me to engage with it in that way if I didn't have the aid of a video. And actually, I would argue that a live person would have made me net worse at making this car dolly work, because I wouldn't have had that opportunity to kind of go back and forth.
That is awesome. Was it a success? Did you get your car hooked up?
It was a success. I can attest that the car dolly made it back to U-Haul in one piece, and my Ford Fiesta is still on the road.
Woohoo! That is a good thing. That is so cool. And I think you're right. How many times have we all, as adults, watched a YouTube video for how to do something, and maybe you watch it through one time. You're like, okay, I think I've got an idea of what we're doing, and then you go and you do it like you did, step by step, and you pause and you try it and you go back. And I remember learning how to thread my sewing machine because I am not good at sewing, but I'm trying. And I had to watch maybe 3 videos and pause them all the time and go back, and same thing. I think it's in part just how we learn. now in 2021. It's just how we learn and gain new information. And so if that's what we're doing in the real world, we really want to make the classroom as close to that as possible, right? That's always one of our goals. I'm curious, does Screencastify have a feature where you can slow down or speed up the video? Is that an option as well?
So it is. All of our videos are saved to Google Drive, and natively in Google Drive, you have that opportunity to watch videos, I think, at 0.5 speed. You can go all the way up to 2x speed, which is interesting. And we actually have partnered with this company called the Modern Classrooms Project. And one of the things that they taught us was that there is lots of choice in terms of how folks decide to engage with content, which frankly was not something that I thought about at all. And it's something that I do. There might be people who are listening to this podcast at 2x speed, and that is how they internalize information. And that's also cool with video and not something that you get with other mediums of communication. You can't say, hey, teacher, talk faster for me or talk slower to me. Like the speed of delivery is just the speed of delivery. So that's such an interesting point.
Yeah, that's another just cool access point. I think that I too didn't think of prior to my own online education recently, where I'm finishing a program at Western Governors, and a lot of it is video content. You're reading a lot of articles and chapters out of books, but then you're watching a lot of videos, and some of them are folks from the Midwest who speak at a different rate than I'm used to, being a native Bostonian. And so I'd be just making those videos go, 1.5 speed or 2 times. And I was able to get the information at the rate that I preferred, and I could still get it, and yeah, I had never thought of it before that. And it made me curious if students maybe are wanting that or giving that option is a good thing. And I think it really is. So there's just so many positives to it.
Absolutely.
Another topic we've addressed on the podcast is assessment. Online, we're constantly assessing our students. It's pretty easy to use whatever LMS you have to gather information about how students are progressing. I'm curious though, how can video or screen recording be used as an inclusive assessment tool? Can we tie those two together as well?
Yeah, for sure. I'm really, really glad you asked that question. And I think that there are two ways that we've tried to answer that question. The first is thinking about how we get information back to educators in terms of how students have understood videos. So lots of times online educators are creating videos, and then there are, in my mind, two questions that are really paramount. The first being, are students actually watching these videos? And the second being, do they understand this content? And the second question is probably the most important one that we need to understand as educators. So one of the things that we've recently added to Screencastify is what we call interactive questions and viewer analytics. And the way that our interactive questions work is they allow educators to add a question at a specific timestamp within the video. So if we go back to these procedural things that we might be teaching students, so you might have a video where in the first 30 seconds, you go through step number 1 of the process. And instead of waiting until the end of that video to be able to say, okay, do you understand steps 1 through 5? Right there in the moment, a teacher can say, okay, make sure that you understand step number 1, and we're going to assess that really quickly in a formative way. And then students know, hey, if I don't have step number 1 down, I go back and I rewatch those first 30 seconds to be able to engage with that. So that's one way that we can both give students some pretty valuable feedback in the moment about where they might need a little bit of additional help, but also provide that data back to the educator so that they understand how videos are being received, and they can use that information to think more broadly about an entire unit, an entire subject, or anything of that nature. But the other thing that I think is important to understand, and I think that this is a realization that I certainly didn't get early in my career as a teacher, but lots of times our assessments are not equitable. I think a little bit about my first year teaching when there was a push for the writing assessment to be available online. On face, that sounds like a fantastic idea. It was going to allow them to grade it much faster. It was going to make the test more secure. But for my students, what it meant was that we now had to teach typing in addition to teaching them how to write an essay. And what happened was lots and lots of my students did not get the score that they needed or that they deserved because they didn't finish the test. So I think about if what we really want to assess there is the ability of students to formulate an argument, to be able to use evidence. Could we have done that via video? Could we have had them talk through their essay? And that would have been much more equitable because it's assessing their ability to actually derive an argument and not their ability to type, which in reality, the test didn't care about, but it was inadvertently assessing it. And I think if we step back for a second as educators, we realize that there are lots and lots of instances in which we have these hidden assessments, I like to call them. And if we think and we say, okay, let's change the modality of the assessment, we actually get a lot better off. And I think that's where video comes in. So if you're listening to this and you're like, hey, there are instances in which my students can articulate better than they can write or better than they can draw or any of those, that's where video as an assessment might actually be a more robust demonstration of student learning.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of the times we are assessing, I love your phrase, a hidden assessment, because a lot of times we are assessing skills that we don't mean to assess. And taking that step back and asking ourselves, okay, what is the skill I'm actually valuing here? What is it I want to know that they can or can't do? And if it's develop ideas and organize them in a succinct way, then yeah, can we use speech to text? Can we use a video? Can we use a scribe? Can we do an interview? Yeah, and any of those things in a video format, absolutely. I think so often we put this emphasis on handwritten material or output, and that's not the reality of today. Not that we shouldn't teach handwriting and that we shouldn't encourage kids to be able to hold a pen and pencil and share ideas on paper, but that there are so many other mediums for us. And if that is not what we're assessing, if we aren't assessing their actual writing in that sense, then yeah, let's figure out other modalities. I think it goes back to that universal design mindset and having that framework in mind when we're creating things. But I think that's happened a lot. There are so many schools now that spend time teaching kids how to take their online state test because it is in that format, and so if we can minimize the time we're spending doing those sorts of things and instead focus on genuine assessment. I also so appreciate the idea of formative assessment through videos as well, because that's great feedback for both, like you said, the student and the teacher, and that creates a great communication loop and a feedback loop as well, where you're informing your practice, the student is learning about their own learning, and you both get to a better spot at the end, closer to the learning target, hopefully, and all of those things. Oh my gosh, this could be a 10-hour podcast. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about getting parents involved in technology and screen recorders and all those things. So stick with us. What's the one thing all online schools and programs struggle with? Student engagement and the ability to truly personalize interventions. How do we solve those problems? With the use of Admin Dash, a brand new Canvas LTI tool from SYS Education. Admin Dash allows online teachers to see a risk assessment score that proactively identifies students who may need more specialized attention or intervention, and offers a communication log that provides an outlet for complete transparency among teachers, admin, students, and families. At just 99 cents per student per year, and with no minimum price and no fees, you can't afford to not use Admin Dash. For more information about Admin Dash, contact sales at syseducation.org and start connecting proactively with your online learners. All right, Nef. Part of the success of any online student absolutely comes from support at home and the collaboration and communication between the school and home.
Mhm.
How can on-demand video help get parents or guardians involved?
Yeah, I'm really excited that you asked that question, and I'm going to answer it with a story. By the end of this podcast, everybody is going to know my whole life story, and that's okay.
Love it.
So I know that you are a parent of a student engaging in online education, which you probably could answer this a million times over from your own personal experience. But the experience that is closest to me is helping my sister navigate through the COVID-19 pandemic, where she was working online and had 4 children in disparate grades.
Oh,
And
gosh.
so we as a family tried to rally, and we are a family of educators. So everybody was trying their hardest to be able to make this work. And what we noticed was that communication from teachers that was time bound just did not work from us. We all had full-time jobs. We desperately wanted to help, but we couldn't make a conference at 9:30 a.m. And this is 4 adults attempting to do it for these 4 different kids. So what actually was impactful for us was being able to watch videos. And those could have been videos that were intended for my nieces and nephews, and being able to consume it as an adult attempting to help gave me an idea of, okay, this is what they're supposed to be learning. This is how this teacher is teaching it. Let me make sure that when I help them, that I'm doing the same thing. I think that we see all of these jokes around what the heck is this Common Core math or whatever it is that might befuddle parents. And what that might mean is that there's a disconnect between how I would explain something to my nephew and how that teacher wants him to learn it. And in order to bridge that gap, teach me the way that you want to teach him, and then we both can engage with it. And I think that that is so impactful from a perspective of instructional video, but it's also impactful from parent communication. I tell a joke all the time that I'm willing to give $1,000 to anyone in any of my trainings who has had an open house that had 100% attendance. And to this day, I have never had to shell out any money. And it's not because parents don't care. It's because there are so many things that might stand in their way of being able to get even the most basic communication. So even things like, hey, we're having this really special assignment that is going to require your student to have this particular thing might be best given out through a video so that that parent can watch it while they're on the graveyard shift, or maybe while they're rushing to hop on a train, or wherever they might engage with it. So it means a lot to us to be able to provide video to folks in places where they are already familiar with. So it might mean that some of our users are creating parent YouTube channels so that in between your other YouTube videos, you get to watch a video directly from your student's teacher and be able to engage with that. Or maybe they are using our QR code feature to send home a letter to parents that includes a nifty little QR code that parents can scan for more information. So I think when we talk about democratizing education for students, it's also about providing access and democratizing information for parents so that we get information out to everyone and allow them to be partners in the classroom.
That is so wise. And I think pulling back the veil of what is happening in the classroom and what you're teaching and how you're teaching it and bringing the parents in, especially through the use of video, it makes so much sense. Because like you say, we are on a totally different timetable than students necessarily or teachers. And so, yeah, I empathize so much with you and your family. And I think it's amazing that you rallied around like that. That's so cool. But yeah, it's hard. It's really challenging to make the school day kind of hours work for, someone working a 9 to 5 or a night shift or whatever it might be, just adult life. And so it's really respectful too, I think, of the various situations that parents and guardians are in working with their kids and supporting their education. And also because a lot of people move to the online world because of the flexibility, because you don't necessarily need to be on from 9 to 3. And so that's really helpful to make anything asynchronous that can be asynchronous. I think that's just
For
really
sure.
respectful of the other adults in that kiddo's life. So awesome. So cool. Nef, I have one final question for you. It's a question I'm asking my guests this season. I really believe that teachers have a huge impact on who we are and sort of how we enter the world when we're teenagers. And I am curious if there is a teacher you had growing up who was your favorite or who had a big impact on you.
Yes. And I am so fortunate to be able to call this teacher a personal friend now. It was
Yay.
a debate coach that I had when I was 15 who taught me how to be a critical thinker. He made me a better argumenter, if that's even a word. He just made me a better human is how I would describe it. And I think what made it so impactful was that while he taught me actual concrete skills, he also just taught me how to better learn and interpret information. And these are things that I get to take with me every single day. So a massive shout out to Chad Meadows. I got an opportunity to follow him to college. He was my college debate coach and teacher, so got to learn from him over a period of about 6 years as I matured as an adult, and now get to call him a friend. And I'm still learning from him. It's free advice now. So it's really awesome.
That is so cool. Yay, Mr. Meadows. Thank you. Very neat. And debate, that's such a challenging class, I'd imagine, and so many skills. And to have that person be one of the educators who really had such a positive impact is, I think, extra special. That's really neat.
Yeah.
Nef, thank you so much for your time today. If listeners want to get in touch with you, if maybe they want to contact you or they want to learn more about Screencastify, where can they find you?
Absolutely. You can find the entire Screencastify squad at Screencastify on Twitter or all of the social platforms. You can also find me personally on Twitter at NiftyNef or reach out to us at hello@Screencastify. Find me personally at nef@screencastify.com. There are so many ways to get in touch with us. Find one. We are here to help out. We're a team of educators helping other educators, so we can't wait to hear from you.
Awesome. Yes. And as a personal Screencastify user, totally support that. Guys, check them out if you haven't used Screencastify yet. It is so worth your time. Thank you again, Nef. This has been really enlightening and really fun conversation. Thanks again for your time today and chatting with me.
Thank you again for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of SYS Presents Adventures in Online Education. Special thanks to my guest, Nefertiti Dukes. Today we learned that to universally design, to consider equity, and to foster more home and school communication, we can use videos when we teach and when we communicate. Screen recorders offer so many tools and features that allow educators to teach more effectively and communicate meaningfully with students and families alike. If you liked what you heard today, please hit subscribe and give us a rating. On Twitter, you can follow me, Natalie Conway, at AOE Natalie, and the show at SYS Presents. If you're interested in finding out more about SYS Education, head to syseducation.org. This podcast wouldn't be possible without our exceptional team at SYS Education, including sound engineers Natalie Farrell and Matt Duran, and our producer, Bo Neal. Thanks for listening, and remember, we can learn new things.
listening.